I'm here with Jonathan Schroder, the director of The Boys in Red Hats, which is coming out in theaters this Friday, July 16th, and it'll be also available on demand. So, Jonathan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show, Ian.
Well, I'm glad to have you on. I watched The Boys in Red Hats recently, and it is one of the most visceral, enlightening, aggravating documentaries I've seen in quite a long time. It achieves something that, think few modern documentaries do, especially ones that are centered on politics, which it achieves balance, or it attempts to, and it uncovers just how sticky and tricky it is to achieve balance when talking about politics, because politics involves real people, and real people are rarely what you see on the news, which is one side versus another side. There's a lot of gray in between. So I want to start off by saying you started off working on documentaries for National Geographic, and then when the Covington Catholic controversy erupted in January of 2019, you decided to go make a documentary about it because you are a Covington Catholic grad. Was there any hesitation in making this a big, it's not exactly a career change because you're still making films, but going off in that direction? And also, what had you learned from years of studying animals that you maybe brought into the world of this beastly politics?
Well, luckily for me, animals don't have strong opinions, nor are they influenced by Fox News, CNN, or MSNBC. I learned a lot from working with National Geographic. We conducted a lot of interviews, and actually, the person who I was filming with on my National Geographic show was the director of photography for The Boys in Red Hats. So hats off to Jason Neff, no pun intended. He's an amazing cinematographer, and the documentary looks like $1 million thanks to his efforts.
Now, when you made this decision, did you recruit crew from your working relationship with National Geographic, or did you just kind of go out and say, I just need to find people, and then your crewmates ended up just fitting the bill?
Well, when the incident happened, I was actually in Michigan. That's where the show is set. And I was around all of my crewmates who happened to be dear friends of mine, and they heard me ranting about it. And I told everyone that I was going to make a documentary. And slowly but surely, I had recruited a handful of people to film The Boys in Red Hats. And it was during their hiatus. We get 2 weeks off, which is rare. And so instead of going to some exotic location or a beach, the crew of the incredible Dr. Pohl came to Cincinnati and crashed in my spare bedrooms, on my couch, on my floors. And we all sort of lived together for 7 or 8 days as we filmed the documentary.
So this whole thing came together during the course of a break. Like how did you line up the interviews and all of that with with your different subjects who span a lot of different disciplines? And I imagine that was tricky to wrangle.
Yeah, it was tricky to wrangle, but I've been at it in the business since I was 19 years old. So I was very familiar with how to schedule interviews, to give enough time between the interviews to where the director of photography could set up a different shot. So it was a grind. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't easy. I mean, we were filming from the time we got up until we went to bed and into the night on some nights.
Wow. And, filming is one thing, but then putting it all together, because COVID happened not long after that, what kind of challenges did you have in, just finishing the movie, getting it out there to where it is right now?
Oh my gosh. So the week that COVID hit was when my final voiceover recording was supposed to be in Detroit. And this is a beautiful facility with state-of-the-art equipment, sound engineers, and just all the bells and whistles that you could want in a sound facility, a place called Ozone in Detroit. But since COVID happened, they shut down. And so they basically taught me how to make a makeshift sound studio in my bedroom. So I basically took every pillow, every blanket, and every towel that I could imagine, and I built my walk-in closet into the most hilarious looking makeshift sound studio that you can imagine. And I'm in there with a towel over my head, and I had this little Zoom recorder, and I ended up sending the audio to the guys in Detroit so they could match their professional audio that I had recorded earlier. So luckily for me, due to the skills of Ozone Sound, the audio sounds fantastic, which that was a big concern of mine. And plus, they made my voice sound palpable. I don't know if you've listened to the sound of your own voice, but at first it was horrifying to hear my own voice narrate a documentary.
Well, yeah, bravo to the Ozone folks and to yourself for coming up with that solution, because you couldn't tell it was filmed in a in a closet with pillows and a Zoom recorder. Were there any other challenges in putting the film together during this time?
Well, I think the biggest challenge, there were several challenges. The biggest challenge for me was during the interviews, and I shit you not. Am I allowed to say shit?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Hell yeah.
I shit you not, my interview subjects, a lot of them were just repeating exactly what they heard on Fox News or MSNBC. And I was watching all of those channels at the time, and it was uncanny and almost borderline amazing how just almost word for word, verbatim, people were, reciting Tucker Carlson or Rachel Maddow. So the first thing I did in the documentary, I threw out all the crap that you're going to hear on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, and you're going to be hearing fresh perspectives on the matter. Another challenge was finding people willing to speak on camera about the incident. There was a lot of doxing going on. There was threats against the students. So a lot of people just didn't want to step forward or have anything to do with it, fearing that they would be next in line to be doxed.
Yeah, I know you had one high school student there who was in shadow and the identity concealed. I think he was a current student, right? He's an underclassman, so that's totally understandable. Were there people that you really wanted to, that you had to pursue? I mean, beside the Sandmann family and Nathan Phillips, folks that you really wanted to pursue but didn't get, or perhaps people that you didn't think you were going to be able to talk to, like the attorney for the Sandmann family, who were surprised that they came forward?
Yeah, I mean, we tried our hardest to get the Black Hebrew Israelites on camera for an interview, and radio silence. And I tried everything from texting, calling. I found one of the guys on Instagram. I was messaging them through Instagram and Facebook. And I think maybe due to the subject matter and how they thought they were going to be portrayed in the film, they didn't respond. Radio silence all around.
Now, in terms of your own, kind of political perspective, I had trouble, and this is possibly a credit to you and the film. I couldn't quite pinpoint where you stood on the spectrum while watching the documentary. I've got some ideas, but was that a challenge for you at all to stay right in the middle while presenting this movie? And did you have to clear out some of your own biases as you did when kind of editing, cutting through the BS of your interview subjects? Not that they were willfully BSing you, but just spouting stuff that they had heard.
I mean, it was hard for me to sit across from someone and hear them badmouth Covington Catholic. But at the same time, I think that's exactly what the documentary needs if you're going to be fair and balanced. When I started the project, I originally envisioned it to be a complete defense piece for the boys. So I think people who are expecting to sit down and see a movie that's just rah, rah, go, Cov Cath, they're going to be severely disappointed. It was certainly a challenge to put my own beliefs on the side and then just, hear people. And even from the Covington Catholic perspective, there was certain interviews that made me squirm in my seat as I'm sitting across from the person.
There seemed to be a disconnect between some of the older Covington Catholic graduates, including yourself, decrying the culture of privilege and elitism and possible racism, at Covington and other elite institutions like it, while also acknowledging that you and some of these other folks, once you graduated, got out into the world, were able to see, people as people and have a more, I guess, balanced view of folks. more tolerance, accepting of diversity and things like that. So I just wondered if there was an attitude of, I got out, I can see everything, clearly now, but it's everybody else in that institution is corrupt and kind of garbage people.
No, I don't think anyone is garbage that goes to that school. What I can say is that if there is a weakness to Covington Catholic, it is the lack of diversity in that area and in that school in particular. When I was at school there was maybe one African-American student there, two tops. There were very few female teachers. So when you're surrounded by white kids and white guys in general, I think you have a limited perspective on the outside world. And you're right. It wasn't until I went to New York City and I'm on set and I'm the only white dude on set that you sort of like, oh, okay, this is different. And then, I had a chance to make friends with all sorts of people of different nationalities and sexual orientations. And that's something that I never would have experienced had I, stayed in Northern Kentucky. But, at the same time, I don't want to make it sound like I'm this, worldly, uber educated person that's looking down upon, these Covington Catholic students or their alumni. Some of my best friends and closest friends, have gone to that school, and I'm still in contact with a lot of them today.
And that's one of the surprising things about the documentary. You spoke highly of, you mentioned New York City, a friend, Brian Williams, who was another Covington grad who sort of reached out to you, or you reached out to him, and he sort of helped broaden your social circles and broaden some of those horizons that you mentioned. He ended up working on, in finance, like on Wall Street. And I won't kind of get into what happens at the end of that story, but there's sort of the iconoclastic ideas of, you've got this Covington, graduate who you have these certain expectations of, but yet has a very diverse kind of open-hearted worldview of people, and also ends up working in finance. And, the narrative is that anyone who works in finance are, just evil corporatist bastards. There are all these different kind of revelations that pop up through the film that really forced, me, I feel like I have a pretty good handle on my own beliefs, but, some of these were definitely challenged. What were some of the biggest beliefs that you had challenged during this, in addition to just having to like bite your tongue or whatever? What was something that you came away with like, wow, I never thought of this from this perspective and I need to rethink some things?
There were certain interviews with some professors that really sort of blew my mind. There's Professor Howard, whose sole job in life as a professor, he studies and does experiments and devoted his career to studying all boys Catholic institutions and elite private schools. And so, some of the things that he was saying, he's never heard of Covington Catholic, but when he was speaking about those institutions in general, it was almost as if he was studying Covington Catholic. I mean, his research and his opinions on what goes on in those institutions were spot on. And I thought, Covington Catholic was a very unique place. It turns out that it's not so unique.
Yeah,
in that regard.
Right. I recognize some of that too. I went to, you and I, it turns out, are about the same age. I think you're a couple of years older than I am, but I went to a Catholic, kind of an elite Catholic school for the first 2 years. And then my financing fell through, so I ended up going to, finishing in public school. And that's a big, talk about a shift in worldviews. But that is something I recognized watching this talk about the culture of Covington, this idea that they drill into excellence and you are sort of going to be the masters of the universe. But I was watching it thinking, the chaperones, some of the parents that we were interviewing from Covington, they didn't seem like, bad people. They seemed like if they're drilling in excellence and superiority into their kids, it's almost like, what else are you supposed to do? You don't want to teach your kids to be victims.
Yeah. And, I would take a step back from that. I don't think, the chaperones or anyone involved is telling the kids that they're superior. It's almost implied, just if you, I don't want to brag about my alma mater, but if you look like who wins the most state championships and who goes to the best colleges, it's Covington Catholic students. So, you look at that and then you can't help but feel superior in some ways. Or when you're in college, it really prepares you for college. And, I went to a state school, and just having gone to Covington Catholic, I was so further ahead than the students that went to public schools. So, Covington Catholic has a lot of great attributes. And, like you said earlier, it was a big challenge for me not to make a defense piece for Covington Catholic. But at the same time, I just think that would be lazy. It would be lazy filmmaking if I just got behind the kids and the chaperones and claimed that they did nothing wrong. So it was very important to me to get both sides of it.
Well, there was, in some of the interviews, you can be heard pressing some of those chaperones on some of their beliefs about, say, white privilege. But then there was no pushback in the other direction on some of the other subjects. Say when you're talking to, I think, Mike Morosky, who was on the local public school board, he was saying that Covington graduates socially inept people. And then there was Anne Brannigan of The Root, when she said that the MAGA hats provoke a reaction, when, sort of a quick defense, not a defense, but a counter could be, well, so does the Black Lives Matter flag. Everything kind of provokes a reaction. I wondered, did you push back on some of those in some of those conversations, and that just didn't make it into the film, or did those just never happen, those conversations?
Those conversations happened, and they didn't make it into the film. And there's, when I first came out with my first cut, it was 5 hours long.
Wow.
And I felt like it was a major accomplishment to get it that short. And so once it was 5 hours long, I called in a professional editor, a guy named John Dilley, and a story producer named Karen Everett, who both work for New Doc Editing in San Francisco. So, the cliche is, when you're editing, you're killing your babies. And so rather than kill my own babies, I had an outside source do that for me. So we all worked together seamlessly, to put what was right in the documentary. But there are so many scenes that were cut, arguments that were cut, that probably could have made it. But if you want to sell or market your documentary, you better come in around 90 minutes. Otherwise, it's an uphill battle.
Did when you say arguments, were there? Because some of those personalities, particularly Anne Brannigan, I mean, she is very much a presence in this film, particularly in the latter part. What were those exchanges like? Did they get heated? Were they sort of tense but polite?
Well, that's a great way to put it. Tense but polite. And just for the record, I didn't interview Anne Brannigan. That was my producer, Justin Jones. So Justin lives on the West Coast. So he took a handful of interviews, and then I did the rest.
Okay.
There was definitely, I would speak to someone before they sat down and be like, look, I'm going to be playing devil's advocate. So they were warned before they even sat in a chair that things could possibly get heated. And as much as I tried to get under the skin of Robert Barnes, the attorney for some of the boys, I just couldn't do it. And I was saying some heinous shit to that guy.
Well, I mean, the kind of money he's pulling down, I think, buys an awful thick layer of protection as far as criticism goes. But plus, as you mentioned in the movie, he's been a guest on Alex Jones, so I get he's probably taken a lot of stuff. But one of the most frustrating, but I think effective aspects of the movie is that kind of point counterpoint in the editing of getting these different points of view. Was there ever a thought to I know this is outside the purview of the documentary about the Covington kids and Nathan Phillips, but was there ever a thought to getting these folks together across from each other at a table and saying, you are talking within your bubbles, these bubbles are bouncing off of each other, why don't you say what you've got to say to another person who's got an opposing point of view, because it doesn't sound like you ever have?
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. And you know what, if I make another documentary, can I hire you as a producer? You can come up with these ideas for me. I
Certainly.
I think a certain, I could pick a handful of the subjects, and they could probably harmoniously have a conversation with opposing views. But there's a handful of them in there, and I'm not going to name names, it probably would come to blows if I put them in the same room.
Well, and again, that's it is one of those things that kind of gets the blood pressure up and the engagement, not in a negative partisan way, but just that if you could only talk to each other. And I think that brings me to, kind of winding down here. I get the sense at the end of the film that you were sort of disillusioned. Hope not everything in the film goes the way that you would have liked it, and that's all I'll say. But there's also a sense that we are just living these bubbles bouncing off of each other politically and socially and all the rest of it. um, are you hopeful at all that we can pop these bubbles, and that maybe this film is the pin or a pin, or do you feel like it's going to come and go, people are going to see it and have their minds made up before and after it's over? Do you think that this film can reach people?
I do think this film can reach people. It seemed to really affect you.
Hmm.
And if the viewers walk away from the documentary feeling similar emotions than you do, then that's mission accomplished to me. Instead of getting the two different sides in the same room and speaking to each other, maybe this is an opportunity for someone with an opposing viewpoint to sit and listen to the other side. And if they want to, they can throw popcorn at their televisions and yell and scream, and that's fine with me too.
As far as the finished movie, have you sent a copy of it to the Sandmann family or to Nathan Phillips? And do you know if they've watched it and have they had a reaction?
I have not sent. No one has really seen the movie except for you and a handful of others.
Hmm.
But that's about to change.
Yes, definitely. So are you planning to try and make it available to them, or are you just going to leave it up to fate if they happen to watch it?
If they watch it, that's great. Hopefully, they buy the DVD on Amazon. No, but they're more than welcome to watch the film.
Okay. And what's next? Has this experience propelled you to do more kind of political and human interest stories, or are you going back to the farm?
I'm not going back to the farm. The joy of making the documentary really, I got the bug. I got the documentary bug. So right now I'm working on a fishing documentary, and I'm also working on a documentary that's, all I'll say about it, it's a political comedy.
A political comedy documentary.
A political comedy documentary. Yes.
Well, I'm all there for that, and hopefully, when it comes out and comes together, we can talk about it, because this is a hell of a film. So, Boys in Red Hats. So, congratulations! Thank you for talking with me about it. And yeah, it's in theaters this Friday, as I mentioned, and on demand. And you said there's a DVD. Is that day and date as well?
Oh no, the DVD probably won't be out until the fall or winter.
Okay, cool. Well, folks can definitely check that out too when it's available. So, Jonathan Schroder, thank you very much for hanging out and talking with me about it.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on, Ian.
All right, take care, man.